Wisconsin Eye is at the West Bend Public Library. We are interviewing the 3 Republican candidates in the February 17th primary. In the 20th Senate District, we're interviewing Mr. Lee Schlenvogt of the town of Port Washington. He's one of the 3 Republican candidates. Lee, thanks for talking to Wisconsin Eye.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
This is your first run for state office, so give us the short version of your bio, please.
Well, I am actually a 4th-generation dairy farmer in the town of Port Washington. I've served in local politics for 25 years. I started out in the town board, town of Port Washington. I served on there for 21 years, 16 of those as chair. During that term, I was appointed to the county board in 2006, and then on to chairman of the finance committee, 2nd vice chair, and in 2013 elected unanimously by my peers for county board chair, and again in 2014 unanimous by my peers as county board chair.
When I interview local officials for the first time, I'm really curious, impact of Act 10 here 4 years later, sir?
Well, the county doesn't have a lot to do with the schools, but I come in contact with a lot of constituents, and they're very pleased. The school boards seem to have a lot more money to work with, okay, and they're quite pleased, and it's worked real well in Port Washington.
Okay. If you're elected to the Senate on April 7th and the winner of the primary is going to be elected because there's no Democratic candidate, one of the first votes you'd cast would be on the next state budget. So talk about a few budget issues.
Okay.
The governor's recommended, as you know, $1.3 billion in bonding to pay for our transportation future. He didn't accept any of the recommendations from his Secretary of Transportation for tax and fee increases. Could you support bonding an additional $1.3 billion, or just how do you think we should pay for our transportation future?
Well, I've got a lot of experience in working with roads and such throughout my 25 years in town and county. When I'm out talking to people, and I've talked to a lot of people in the last few months, they're quite cool on borrowing money. They would like to see maybe doing a scoring system, and I'm all about doing that also. I feel we should score and rate everything, projects, and what they should be. And if we have to put off some projects in the transportation, maybe that's what we have to do. But they're all concerned, as that we don't want to raise any taxes no matter what. We don't want any new taxes. We don't want to raise taxes.
So some of the major projects that are in the governor's budget, the Zoo Freeway, Hone Bridge, widening the interstate from Madison to Illinois, paying for our share of the Stillwater Bridge, should some of those maybe be delayed since you're not willing to raise taxes and fees?
I think if we don't have the money, it's like anywhere else. In your household budget, in our county budget, if you don't have the money, sometimes you have to delay. They should all be scored, and by level of importance, that's how we would do it. That's how we do it in our local government.
On the UW system, the governor would remove $150 million a year in general aid for the UW system, but on July 1 of 2016, he would give the regents, rename them the authority, give them the autonomy to run the entire 26 campus system. Do you support the governor's recommendations?
I like that idea. I know, and I've talked to Mr. Cross, and he's a good leader. And when I talked to legislators in the last couple of weeks, some of their concerns is the accountability factor and who's going to be accountable and how is it going to be structured. That's one thing that we'd have to discuss while we're talking about the budget in the legislature and how this is going to get structured. That's a very important part of it.
So you have some major questions about the governor's plan. Is that a fair summary?
It has to be looked at and has to be fully vetted amongst everybody. I mean, I understand we need to do cuts. We all get that. There's no doubt about it. We got a great UW system. One of my daughters graduated from UW and had a job a week after she graduated in finance. So it's a great system, but like anywhere else, I believe in a scoring system. I know that some campuses maybe have absolutely no room for cuts, and there's some campuses that may have room for cuts. But this all should be discussed, and as far as the leadership, what happens and who's going to be held accountable is important.
3 and 4 years from now, do you think what is now the regents and what would be the authority should have the complete autonomy to run the system?
If the accountability is there and we can hold them accountable, I think that'd be a great idea.
Okay. What about the governor's plan to divert income taxes paid by NBA athletes, both our Bucks and the visiting teams, to support up to $220 million in bonds for a new arena if the current owners and the past owners, Senator Cole, and city and county Milwaukee governments contribute $300 million? Could you vote for that?
Also, talking to all the constituents, especially in my area, because of the Brewers and the stadium tax, they're also quite cool on using any public tax money to fund a private center or a private, and they got a real problem with that. My issue is I don't like using taxes to pay for any private enterprises. When this first came before the county board, before the sale even was, we had some number of people that came in and spoke to us about it, and our county board was not real pleased with using tax dollars or any. We'd favor some type of a use tax on a ticket sale or whatever, so people who go, but for using public money to fund private enterprises, and my constituents were really, really standoffish on that.
You and your constituents are still helping to pay for Miller Park, right?
That's correct.
And the lesson of the Miller Park example, the funding?
Well, it was structured on sales tax, obviously,
right,
and it was supposed to be sunsetted. Well, as economies go up and down, so do revenue from sales tax. So it is stretched out a little bit longer, but it should be sunsetting. And I think that the constituents learned from that they weren't real generous with spending more public money on private enterprise.
The Choice and Voucher Program, the governor's recommended lifting the 1,000 cap statewide, completely eliminating it in the next 2-year budget. Your position on that expansion?
I like school choice. I think it's a great idea. Both of our daughters went to parochial school. I think one of my stances, and I'm really concerned about, is if there's any government overreach into the private schools, that would eliminate prayer. We are very strong in our faith and our family, and we're just concerned that it hasn't happened yet. We know it hasn't happened yet, but there isn't any real 100% guarantee that it couldn't happen.
Okay. The right to work issue is an issue in this campaign. Would you vote for a right to work law in Wisconsin?
Absolutely. I don't feel that anybody should have to join anything to work anywhere. The unions can still exist, but you don't have to join if you don't want to.
Another bill that's now being debated that travels with the issue is doing away with the prevailing wage. Your position on that?
I also feel there's a need to eliminate prevailing wage. That affects us absolutely when we have different programs or different bids that we've done.
Does that drive up the cost of some of your county projects?
It has driven up some things. It's driven up a water tower project that happened in a different municipality in our county. And it came back and actually had to write more. It was a job that was done, but they decided it had to be prevailing wage, and it cost more money. I think prevailing wage should be eliminated.
1 in 5 Wisconsin residents get their health care from the Medicaid program. The Wisconsin Hospital Association says our Medicaid reimbursement rates are the second lowest in the nation. Do you think those reimbursement rates should be raised?
Whenever something changes, it has to come from somewhere. And my biggest concern is, where is it going to come? If it means that we have to increase taxes or increase budget, I couldn't support it. But if we can find a place to get it, I would be okay with it. But anytime we have new taxes or increased taxes, I can't support that.
If our tax collections were higher than expected, should that additional go to K-12 schools or the health care, or to lower the cut for the UW system? What do you think should be the first draw if we get higher tax collections?
I think it should go into education. I'm a strong supporter of education.
On your website, you list welfare reform as one of your top priorities. Could you outline how you would change that?
Well, I've said from the beginning of my campaign that people need to become accountable to receive entitlements. We all understand that there's people who need entitlements. I understand it. As Paul Ryan said, welfare should be a hand up, not a handout. And I subscribe to that absolutely. I think we should institute drug testing for entitlements. I think you should have to, like Governor Walker said, sign up for job training. There's over 70,000 jobs on our state website for trained and skilled workers. And also I think you should have to sign up for a job. The unfortunate part is all you have to do in Wisconsin is lower your standard of living and you never have to go to work, and that's wrong.
Another priority on your website, you would like to eliminate the heroin epidemic. What next steps should be taken on that drug problem, sir?
Well, that's a large problem with many different facets. One thing, I give full support to our law enforcement agencies and to our judicial system to prosecute. Another thing is we have to educate. We need to get into the younger classes, even down into the middle school, and make these kids understand how terrible this is. The education process that we've gone through for, let's say, intoxicated driving, it's worked well. I've noticed that in my own kids and their peers that they either stay at someone's house or they use a taxi. I attribute that a lot to education. And that's the way things are. And if we can educate these kids just how terrible this heroin is, we can maybe stop it a little bit at an earlier age.
Another priority on your website is the tech college system. Your thoughts on changes or funding for the tech college system?
That also is there's two different ways of looking at that. One is we need to get shop classes back into the younger classes, the middle school. Teach these kids like we all did, make a birdhouse, make a toolbox. Let them to learn how to use things and do things with tools in their hands, get the Xbox out of their hands, and learn that an opportunity in the trades is a good workplace to be. I have guys that went to school with me that got a job in trades, and they're retired and they have places up north. A job in the trades is a great opportunity to make a living. And if we can educate these children and also the parents that a job in the trades as well, you get them into the technical side of it. I went to technical school. I'm a big believer in technical schools. I think this would be a great opportunity and get more people into the workforce.
There are some that would like to take the tech colleges off of the property tax. Do you support that change? It'd be pretty costly, but do you think that would be a good change to work for?
Well, that's another thing that should be looked at, because it's a huge part of our tax bill. But there's some technical colleges that are just phenomenal. They can't even get the kids graduated because the employers are pulling them from the schools ahead of time.
Pulling them right out before they get their
They're pulling them out before they get their degrees, welders, robotics, you name it. And I actually work closely with them because the county board chairs appoint board members.
Yes. The governor in his budget message focused on property taxes and said his continuing controls on local governments and funding tax credits would reduce the property tax bill by 5% on the median valued home. Do you agree with his focus on the property tax, or would you like to see more focus on cutting other taxes?
Oh, I think property tax affects a lot of people, and I think that's a great idea.
Okay. Lastly, do you want to highlight differences between you and your two opponents on February 17th?
Well, I guess the major difference between myself and my two opponents is the experience I've had in government. I know it's not been a state office, but it's been about representing people and doing budgets and holding taxes to where they should be. This past year, we had a zero budget in Ozaukee County. I'm quite proud of that. I'm also quite proud of the zero tax increase. That comes from a lot of hard work and a lot of time put in and working well with my board, because they all have to be on board in order to do it. Also my staff and the administrator, when we tell our staff and our department heads we have a zero budget, well, it takes work to get there, but it can be done.
Okay. Very good. Lee Schlenvogt of the town of Port Washington is one of 3 Republican candidates in the February 17 primary in the 20th Senate District. Lee, thanks for talking to Wisconsin Eye.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
Thanks.